So welcome first to Inclusive Leadership, an introduction to creating an inclusive workspace. My name is Allan, my pronouns are they, them, and I am an equality, diversity and inclusion consultant and trainer with the Eco Group. The Eco Group's mission is to eradicate discrimination and inequality by providing companies with the understanding and tools they need to really make impactful initiatives within their organisations. Let's move on. There's a bit of housekeeping for the session. Just obviously in a real session you would do fire safety, but I expect you all to know your own fire safety for where you are. If you have any questions throughout the session, please use the raise hand button. It is going to be an interactive session. There's going to be breakout rooms for you all to get a discussion going with each other. And I believe Zoom also has closed captions available. I did see them somewhere. If you know how to set them up yourself, please do. James, I did check this and I've lost where they were.
No worries, leave it with me. I'll try and fill in for that.
Yeah,
later.
So please ensure you're sitting comfortably. Cameras on for at least the breakout rooms when you're discussing people, and if you be so kind to mute your mics unless you're speaking. So who am I? As I said, I'm an equality, diversity and inclusion consultant. I'm queer, I'm neurodiverse. Previous to being an equality, diversity and inclusion consultant, I got a degree in sound production. I worked as a level 3 railway signal technician, and I got my level 3 CIPD last year. In my spare time, I like to play with fire. I throw axes, and I like to be a mentor to people who need support. So the first thing we come to is about instructions and considering what you need to do what people need to know about you to include you. And this sort of goes both ways. So for me, the best practice of instruction is preferred name, your pronouns, and depending on the situation, maybe your job title. If you're in a training situation, I imagine job title sets up some of the dynamic between you and who you're training. So just a consideration, what should you consider when someone is introducing themselves? Do I know how to pronounce their name correctly? That's particularly an issue if it's not a traditional British name. We live in the UK, do tend to struggle with names that aren't typically British. But it takes practice, and as long as you're doing it respectfully, that person will help you get their name correct. And then, will the pronouns take a conscious effort? Switching from using he, him, and she, her pronouns to using they, them pronouns is hard enough, but some people use other neo pronouns like they, their, which can be used with an X or a Z, depending on their preference. That's going to take conscious effort to get used to, so you need to be aware that you're going to require that conscious effort. I'm going to invite everyone to change the display name on Zoom if they feel comfortable. I know how you can do this. If I don't know how to use the captions, I do know how to do this. If you find your name on the participant list and go to more, you can rename yourself and you can just put in brackets what your pronouns are. As mine are presented brackets they, them, and James has his as he, him. And just to give you a few seconds to do that, me and James are going to do a quick introduction. I forgot my words session. So if I was meeting James for the first time, I would say, hi there, my name is Allan, my pronouns are they, them, and it's nice to meet you.
Hi, I'm James, and my pronouns are he, him.
And that's perfect.
It's very nice to meet you, Allan.
Thank you. For fifth time, I believe. So yeah, it's that simple. It's just it's opening up that line of respect right from the off. So a few folk have updated, and it's perfect fine if you don't want to. If you want to do it later on, that's fine as well. These are what I think you should try to leave the session with, and hopefully I help you do that through this session. But I think you should leave with an understanding of why inclusion is important, particularly within L&D. A reflection on your own inclusivity, how have you felt included in the past, and what can you do to make sure that you're making people feel included going forward. A basic understanding of how to be more inclusive, and some practical actions to be more inclusive. I think it would be really helpful for yourselves to look for at least 3 actions that you can apply to your day-to-day to be more inclusive. And that really helps you drive this home for the ones who, particularly for those ones you don't get to use very often. So we also did housekeeping, but I do want to set this up. Training, as you all know, should be a safe space, but with this particularly, we'll be exploring sensitive topics that you may or may not have had personal experience of. Your input is invaluable. I do want you to ask me questions at any time you feel you need to, and I want you to get involved, but participate with the session as much or as little as you feel comfortable. There will be no judgment of your views, but we do ask people to be respectful. And this is a safe space, so it's confidential. I would hope that you're not going to go out and talk too much about what people did that was maybe embarrassing in the session, or share people's confidential information. So what is inclusion? I'd like to ask if anyone wants to come off mute and say what they think inclusion is.
Need to throw myself out there.
No problem, perfect.
About providing a level platform for every accessibility for all.
Yeah, good answer.
Yeah, I think just to build on that, I would say inclusion is an environment in which people can feel they can be their authentic self.
Yeah, definitely. So I've actually got a really good quote from Werner Myers. Diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance. And I've seen a few folk take this a little bit further with the belonging aspect coming into equality, diversity and inclusion. Belonging is knowing the steps to the dance. And that's about educating people and making sure they feel that they belong there through how you impart knowledge and wisdom to them. So what do you think the benefits of making people feel included are, particularly within L&D?
Say that again, sorry.
Oh, go for it, Alex.
Could you just repeat it a second?
Yeah, what do you think the benefit of making sure people feel included within an L&D environment are? Like, why do you think it's important?
For engagement?
Yeah, definitely. If people don't feel included, they're likely to be disengaged.
I think all learning is kind of like the abstract translated into your personal experience, and then translating that into kind of change behavior and learning and increased performance, or whatever it is that's being kind of discussed. So I think inclusion is important in the learning environment because not everyone's experiences are the same. Even within this room today, we're all looking at this particular topic in a different way. We all bring different perspectives, and so inclusion kind of helps those different perspectives come out and more meaningful.
And that's a great answer. It actually helps lead into the next slide. So we're about to go into some breakout rooms, back into hopefully the breakout rooms you were with earlier. And I want you to just reflect on these two questions. Times that you felt excluded. It can be anything, but I think it'd be best to try, if you can, find something in L&D, tie it to the session, and then times you felt most included in an L&D setting. And then just think about what was happening in that moment. Why did you feel that way? And were you aware of how others might feel in that situation as well? So James, I'm just going to ask you to pop everyone into a breakout room for 10 minutes.
Yeah, we're in new breakout rooms. There's 4 groups of 4, and I'm opening the rooms now.
Perfect. So I hope everyone found that interesting and not too exposing. I know it can be difficult to share particularly difficult stories where you didn't feel included. Does anyone have a story they would like to share to the wider group about a time they felt excluded?
Yeah, I can share an example. I was in a breakout room with Charlotte, and we both gave examples that are perhaps not ones that you would normally think would necessarily be a way of excluding people. But my one was I worked for quite a large retail organisation that had a lot of retail management courses, and I'd not been in an environment where we had that routinely. And I found myself going bright red whenever, the icebreaker at the start and things. And I just used to feel like other people were really confident compared to me. So it's probably more from a neurodiverse point of view. So I found it hard, and I didn't think there was an appreciation that not everyone's confident at standing up and speaking in front of the group.
Yeah, perfect example. You spoke from a neurodiverse point of view. I had a moment on Friday. We do team huddles at the start and the end of the week, and we did an icebreaker on Friday that required you to have as a memory game. And I have ADHD, so my memory is atrocious, and I forgot the alphabet halfway through, like my second go round. So yeah, and I got to cheat because I went first, so I only had to remember the first letter of the alphabet the first time round, and then the second time round I had half the alphabet to learn. Charlotte, you got your hand up.
Sorry, just find my unmute button. Yes, yeah. So I was with Ben. So my example was I won't put my camera on, but I am not a classic size 10, shall we say, if that is a inclusive way of speaking. And I worked for a very large airline, and when I went for my uniform fitting, my normal dress size didn't fit. And so when I turned up for my first day and my training with the L&D team, I didn't have a uniform, and I then didn't feel inclusively part of the actual team, because it was just like, well, what's wrong with you? Why? Well, effectively I was fat shamed, I suppose, because I couldn't fit into the uniform, sort of thing. So. And
you said the uniform wasn't yours. You have your dress size that you've given to the company, and they sent you a size that didn't conform to your typical dress size.
Correct.
Yeah, and again, I think a lot of folk would probably be in that situation where they've got here's our standard uniform. I imagine construction companies are probably quite bad for having a one size fits all for overalls and stuff, and that probably quite triggering for people who are of different sizes. I can imagine I've got a friend who's 4'10". Imagine her getting given a one size fits all overall that just drowned her, and how that would feel. Ruth.
Yeah, I was going to give one example, but that talk of the uniform, yeah, and all uniform almost universally is designed around the male physique.
Yes.
So if you have work somewhere where you have to wear a high vis or any safety gear whatsoever, it is not going to fit comfortably if you're a woman, and you will not feel professional or well fitted.
Yeah, definitely.
My example was actually outside of work training. I do karate as a hobby.
Yeah.
And I went on a karate course with some guys. I'd never done one. Normally I train with the usual people, but this was a different group. I thought I'd go along, give it a try. And when I turned up, I realized I was the only woman there, and I was the only person there under the age of about 50. And they treated me like I was an idiot. And I have this thing where I have to go slow. I do it slowly 1 time. I do it slowly 2 times, 3 times, 4 times. Then I get faster. Then it's bam, 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 bam. I can do it. But I have to go slow. I have to go through the motions those first few times. I can't see and do. But because I had to go slow the first few times, they kept treating me like I was incapable.
Yeah.
This is just how I learn. I don't learn how you do. I can't just see it and then do it. I have to run through the motions physically a few times. Then I'm at it, and I can do it. And it was infuriating that because I learned in a different way to them, they somehow saw me as defective, or my way of learning wasn't the right way. So there's something wrong with me and I'm not as good. Drove me nuts.
So they couldn't adapt their style of training to suit the people in the room, and they expect everyone to learn the way they wanted you to learn.
Indeed, but then I realised, of course, the room is full of very similar individuals, and that's you end up with a room full of similar individuals because you isolate those who aren't the same, and you self-deselect yourself from the group. You just don't go back again.
And just picking up a point, you said that most of the group were 50 plus. They've been in the work environment for a few decades. I imagine if they'd been given the opportunity to understand their better learning techniques, they might have find that they were in the same boat as you maybe 10, 20 years ago, where the learning style didn't suit them and no one accommodated them. So they had to accommodate the style. And we're trying to get away from that. Claire, is that hand to push me on, or you want to share your own experience? Thanks. So yeah, we do have quite a tight timeline. So I'm going to move on.
We're all right, actually. We're okay. I think we're okay. I think I misread the time last time. So we're not too bad if anyone said it. I've got something I'd just like to say about when I first started work and I wasn't a graduate, and all the graduates came in on the graduate scheme and got what I felt at the time, all the training and all the attention. And I even though I'd sort of gone to university, I wasn't coming as a graduate. I felt very, very isolated and I'm totally unloved, and I felt that no one was interested in my development. So I just had that thought as you were talking about that. So I definitely didn't feel included in what was going on with the organisation.
And these people have spoken about a lot of different issues here. So we've had Ben spoke about it possibly being a neurodiverse issue. Charlotte spoke about it being body shaming, essentially. Ruth, it's feels a little bit like ageism, as well as maybe just judgmental because of your different learning style. People can be excluded for all sorts of reasons, even in a learning environment. So yeah, neurodiversity, if you are out about your sexuality or your gender identity, your ethnicity, all of these can end up being places where people exclude you. Did anyone have an example of where they felt most included? And thinking about that and how it could be applied to L&D. Nope. Charlotte.
Sorry, I can give an example of after I'd felt excluded. When it was rectified, it was actually I felt most included that I then got to disclose that I was neurodiverse, so I didn't feel like I was hiding it so much. So I think when I felt excluded, it was because they'd given an unrealistic deadline for my ability and I needed a reasonable adjustment. Prior to that, I'd just been keeping up with everyone else, but when they'd made it smaller, I just couldn't. It wasn't something I was able to achieve. And I think, if anything, it did give me the opportunity to then share with my peers that I don't have the same ability and I do need adjustments, and not to be ashamed of it. So I think that did definitely make me feel more included.
Yeah, definitely. And having those reasonable adjustments does go a long way to making the workplace much more manageable for people who need them, and having them within an L&D environment definitely supports your development process. Charlotte, you popped your hand up. Do you still want to?
Yeah, sorry, I pressed the clap button by mistake, but no, yeah, Ben and I were actually, we both really struggled to find an example of when we felt specifically included. You know, we both said that we've attended lots of training and sessions and things, and whilst we could talk about something where we had felt excluded, it was very, very difficult to, you know, to pinpoint something that we specifically felt included in, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I get that. It's you don't often see when you're being included, but it's obvious when you feel excluded.
Yeah.
I was actually going to share one of my experiences, and it was a comparison between my last workplace and my current workplace. Now, obviously, I am biased. I work for this company, so I clearly enjoy working here. But the equal group, the difference between where I've worked before and how included I feel here is huge. What they did when I was onboarding, trying to understand like who I was, how I learned, what they could do to accommodate me, made me feel really valued as an employee. And it meant that when I was in training sessions with my boss and with the ops manager, I was super engaged because I felt I could trust them, and I felt like I could disclose things to them in the moment when I had to. So I'm not going to push anyone else for any other stories.
No, I'm happy to share one.
Yes.
I was in a World Cafe session, and that was phenomenal. The host took everybody in such a fantastic way that you could not feel but not included. And because you sat around small tables and there were a few of you and there was no hierarchy at all, that was the most fantastic inclusive. I just wanted to throw that one out.
Yeah. And it's probably one of the drawbacks to being virtual is it is hard to include people because we're all virtual, and it's hard to see people's faces and gauge their reaction. In that personal circumstances, you said you were all sitting around tables and there wasn't a hierarchy. That's something I have seen coming into a lot of physical spaces, and it's about how you set up the room and making sure that there's not a here's the head table where the instructor sits, and then everyone has to sit around that and face it. It's no, we're going to have this interactive, everyone talking to each other and sitting at tables, and the instructor often doesn't have a fixed point. They go between the tables, and then when they have to stand at the front of the session, much like I'm doing right now. Mark?
Yeah, I think I've been involved in learning events, whether I've delivered them or whether I've been on the recipient of them. So I attended a kind of a coaching. I was a delegate on a coaching program, and I think actually for people to feel included, it's our role as learning and development practitioners to create space for that. And to, when we ask a question, to actually be curious and mean the question we're asking. So when we're saying, you know, how do we feel about this? What I'm really asking is, how do you feel about this? All the reasons why you think it's a great idea, all the reasons why you're indifferent, all the reasons why you're disagreeing with that. Because I think sometimes we can feel under pressure to kind of like move through an agenda. And actually, if you start from a place of curiosity and create a session where people can contribute in a group, people can contribute in pairs, people can jot ideas and reflect on their own, then that's a good starting place, I think.
That's yeah, perfect. So I'm delivering this session in about an hour and 15 minutes. Typically, we would make this an afternoon session. Depending on the size of the company, we might make it a day session. But that's a perfect way to do it, is that starting from that place of curiosity and trying to engage them where they're at and understanding why they feel the way they're feeling about certain parts of the lesson or the situation. I'm just going to move on to the next. So hopefully everyone saw the handout that came with this session. It's got some really useful tools and it's got an impact model at the end that will help you apply some of what we're talking stuff. But this was a really important thing that was in the handout that I wanted to just quickly go over before we go into the next bit. But this is what inclusion means to me and to the eco group. And I've tried to tailor it a little bit towards L&D. But biggest one is respect. People need to feel that their efforts and achievements are acknowledged, they're treated equally, and they are valued for their uniqueness as much as for their contributions. They need to feel that they belong in the learning space. They need to feel that their input is being considered and integrated into the process. They can form positive connections with colleagues and educators, and their culture and background are understood. That one's a really important one that isn't always easy to do. But if you've got a longer session, particularly if you're doing like maybe a couple of weeks or a few sessions with people, it's maybe easier to engage them and understand their culture and background. If you can't do that, it's about having that humility to understand you can't know everyone's background and not treating everyone, it's that age-old treat everyone the way you wish to be treated. You have to take that with a pinch of salt, because not everyone wants to be treated that way, and it's not always appropriate to treat everyone the way you want to be treated. So the next one's empowerment. Unique needs are accommodated, information, support and resources are available to help people perform well, and there's an appropriate, it says work-life balance and flexibility that they require. This goes for learning development. So you think about like breaks during training sessions, if you're having a full day session or a week session, making sure people have the breaks they need so that they can stay engaged with learning. And fair progression. So this is, they can see people themselves succeeding, moving forward with the training, so they know that that training is open to them. There's a well-developed and supported learning plan, and they have equal access to role models, mentors, and development opportunities. There's some of this, everything here is not stuff that you can control as a learning development facilitator, but when you're going into these companies, you can maybe see some of what's going on, or if you're doing it for your own company, you can see some of what's going on, and you can maybe challenge that and ask the company what they're doing to be more inclusive, to help with your learning development program. So I do have a question on this. What Mark's already alluded to it a little bit, but what could you do in a learning environment to make diverse groups feel included? And I hope you know this, but I think trying the protected characteristics, we have under protected characteristics, let me see if I can remember all 9 of them: age, sex, sexuality, gender reassignment, ethnicity, disability, religion, pregnancy and maternity, and I've forgotten one. But just don't have to think about all of them, but what do you think you could do to make people feel included? Think about those. And we're just going to open it up to the room and see if anyone wants to go forward.
One thing that I've been quite mindful of in some of the sessions that I've delivered is some of the graphics you use.
Mm-hmm.
Just you know, doesn't always have to be a man and a woman together, that sort of thing. You know, if you're using any photos or things like that, to just be trying to show a more, you know, diverse approach in some of the graphics that you use.
Yeah, so a lot of the graphics are, if they're not male orientated, they're quite often men and women. It's very, I've noticed that the graphics with more than one woman and no men are quite rare. There's also, talking about graphics, the way you transition between slides or the way you display information can all impact how people absorb that information. So that sort of speaks, one, on Charlotte's point, a little bit to gender, but also to gender identity and sexuality to some extent. And then the next bit that I added there was sort of more neurodiversity. Ben mentioned neurodiversity. I'm not sure what Ben's neurodiversity is, but I imagine Ben has his own preferred ways of absorbing information. And not everyone's probably accommodated that in Ben's experience, if it's anything like mine. Does anyone else have anything that you think they should think about when they're trying to make diverse groups feel included?
I'll just give a quick example. I think for those of us who are concerned about being more inclusive and worry about one's ability in the moment to not worry about keeping to an agenda and stuff like that, is actually build into the agenda moments when you do something like B's and C's, where you ask about benefits and concerns. You're basically asking, okay, so tell me about your concerns right now and your positive feelings right now. And if you build that in structurally, it can overcome one's inabilities in the moment to do right by your genuine curiosity.
Thanks, James. I'm not sure who the hand up first, whether it was Claire or Mark. So.
Go for it, Claire.
Thank you. So I just want to share, I was doing some work with a really, really big charity on some leadership development work. And one of the things they wanted to do was to increase the number of Black people in leadership. And I was doing lots of focus groups, and everybody came back and said that it was the lack of role models at a senior level that was sort of not preventing them, but was making them think that they wanted to move to another organisation because it didn't feel inclusive to them. So I think they were trying to do stuff bottom up, but actually needed to sort it out at the top in terms of being a great role model. And I think that's a challenge for lots of different things, whether it's women in leadership or LGBT, TQ, etc., or disabled.
Yeah, the bottom up or top down approach, neither of them work individually. It has to be both. But add to that, you need to have this is moving away for a bit from L&D, but the middle management is usually your biggest blocker, because they're the ones that benefit from the status quo the most. But that's where you maybe want to target your interventions. but if you've got both the bottom up and top down, hopefully you eventually address the middle management. Mark.
What I think I was going to say now. Oh yeah, I think that a couple of things. So one of them, I think, if you're in a learning event, it's to, especially if you have a preference for extroversion,
yeah,
that you kind of like need to tell yourself and be comfortable with silence. I think there's a thing that happens where, as you're more junior, possibly within a learning role, that you want the session to be liked by everyone. You want to have the session to solve everyone's problems and everyone to kind of like take away. And that's a good aim. It's, you know, but actually the bullet point on your slide that really resonates for me is my input is considered and integrated. And actually, sometimes it's okay just to ask for someone's opinion and for you to not solve their problem.
Yeah.
And because sometimes people don't need to be rescued. And actually, one solution doesn't fit all, because actually when we talk about protected characteristics, often people are in multiple boxes. You know, you could be gay and have a disability, and actually people that span different protected characteristics are probably the most vulnerable people in society. And so sometimes just allowing people to hear points of view is enough. We don't actually have to sometimes solve the problem, or as a trainer add the it's okay, you know, level on top of that, if that makes sense. And so actually just being really, really, really careful about the contribution that you play in the room, in addition to everyone else that's in there.
Yeah, definitely, that's a really good point about just listening to the person, and you don't have to solve that problem for them, particularly there and then, but letting them know that they've been heard and you are appreciative of their position can go a long way in making them feel included. Charlotte.
Sorry, me again. Can't get my words out. Some of the activities that you do can also be really impactful as well. You know, that whole icebreaker thing can actually, and going along the lines of neurodiversity, asking people to, you know, talk about personal things or where's your favorite holiday destination can actually make people feel really uncomfortable if they're not comfortable sharing. So, you know, we're trying to get people to ice break, but actually they might not want to. So I think sometimes we need to be aware of the activities we're making or asking people to do.
Yeah, it's hard to get away from a lot of the icebreakers because they do work for a lot of people. But you're right. A lot of times my answer changes because I make it up on the spot because I'm not comfortable sharing it all the time for a lot of those questions. But yeah, those are really good examples. Ruth, very quickly, because I've just been nosing at my own timeline.
I'll be super quick. I just say I learned a lesson when I went to an event, an evening CPD event aimed at learning professionals, and I sat at the table. We were having a discussion point. It was one of those. Someone walked around with a microphone, and you want a speaker from each table to kind of explain what the table came up with. And I said to my table, I'm having a bad mental health day, which basically is my memory shot. So I can join in the conversation, but you stick a microphone in my mouth, I will not be able to remember everything we said. So I'm not going to talk for the table. Someone else is going to have to do it. And the guy came around the microphone and came up to me and was like, who from this table is going to speak? And everyone was silent. And he's like, you. And he picked on me. And I was like, no, I'm not talking on behalf of my table. He was like, no, come on, you can do it. And he kept trying to be all encouraging and reassuring. And I'm like, just respect my no, it's not me. Listen to me. And I thought, my gosh, I hope I've never done that to anyone. And I definitely aren't going to do it again if I have.
Yeah, and it sort of speaks to what Mark was saying, getting sort of swept up in the moment and trying to be super extroverted and inclusive and try and get an energy up in the room, and forgetting to be mindful of how people might be feeling in that moment. And another example of when no means no. But yeah, I do have to move on because I've noticed my timing's a bit off again. I think I've fallen behind, but we're going to go into another breakout room session. Actually, I think we've kind of done this just there. I don't think the breakout room session is going to add a huge amount to it. So we were supposed to talk this, but does anyone have any thoughts particularly on fair progression, respect, empowerment, or belonging, and specifically under these?
Just something else that just comes to mind around, I sort of work a lot in manufacturing and have to sort of try and work with night shift. And so we always ask night shift to come off night shift and come on to day shift to do their training. And you know, a lot of them might have children or caring, or you know, they can't just do it like that. And that just seems, you know, in hindsight, just feels wrong. And also in terms of learning, they're probably not in the best, probably tired as well. Either done a shift, or then we're telling them to go back after training and do a shift. So again, thinking how to be inclusive of, you know, working patterns as well. And I guess the way that you do it, you know, does it have to be face to face? Can it be virtual? That might help accommodate some people.
Yeah, virtual is a big aspect of making it more inclusive for a lot of people. Being in a physical room with a lot of other people can be really triggering for some members of a society. And as you said, I had the changing of night shifts, so I could, when I worked at Network Rail, to come off night shifts so I can go to training. Although the way we worked out really well, good in your favour, because it meant you end up getting paid for like an extra shift more than you were supposed to, because you still get paid for your 2 night shifts that you missed, so you could go on a training session. But yeah, it's definitely something to think about. So for me, with these sections, fair progression within L&D environment, we've kind of alluded to it in that, having that understanding of how people want to learn, but also just making sure that you're not judging someone else's progression by everyone else's progression. So Ruth mentioned that she learns by doing it repetitively at a pace that suits her, until she gets it into her head, and that's that repetitive learning process that works for Ruth, and she had an experience where it didn't work for her. If that trainer, that group, had forced Ruth to progress at their level, that wouldn't have been fair to Ruth, and she would have likely fallen a little bit behind and felt that she wasn't getting it because it didn't fit her learning style. And that sort of talks about respect. Again, great example from Ruth with the trainer thrusting a microphone in her face and not taking that no. That's showing a lack of respect for the people in your room. If they don't want to talk, and they don't want to get engaged, that is their choice, and there could be many reasons for that. Maybe they have social anxiety, maybe they are having poor mental health at that particular time. You don't know what's going on in their family life. And empowerment for me, it's that ability to self-learn as much as it is to learn from the trainer, and take hold of your own learning. You need a facilitator to guide you and be there to answer questions, but Mark sort of talked about it as well, and that allowing someone to develop their own process that works for them. Sometimes you don't have time and you have to forego that, like tonight, but hopefully in bigger sessions and longer sessions you have that option to let people be empowered. And belonging, again, Mark spoke about this, and being able to be heard and have your thoughts and concerns considered, and where necessary and possible integrated into the learning. The last point under the belonging was about understanding everyone's culture and background. I said something along the lines of it's not always possible to understand every single culture and background. So sometimes it requires what I term cultural humility, and understanding that you can't know everyone's background, you can't know everyone's identity, and you can't know how to approach everyone's identity, but being open yourself as a facilitator to learn how to approach that person, it will help take you forward in that process and engaging with them. So we're going to move on to how to be more inclusive. I'm just going to double check. Yes. So we've got a quick exercise. We're going to do a few polls. Hopefully James has the polls ready. So we've got some idioms that some of us probably use on a fairly regular basis. And it's just asking if these are acceptable, specifically in an L&D environment, but also just in general. So James, if you want to pop that poll up. And everyone, if you just want to have a think and answer how you think is appropriate.
The poll is launched.
Good.
So
I don't even know what some of these mean.
I don't even know what's going on. I'm really sorry.
That's all right. So there should be a poll has popped up on your screen, and you just answering the questions.
What's the context? I don't understand.
So it's just asking whether you think these would be acceptable things to say in a learning environment. I'll go into more explanation after. This is just a sort of exercise to see what people think. Based on what's written, do you think that's an appropriate thing to use or say in a inclusive environment?
So let me end the poll and share the results.
Sorry, I haven't even done it yet. 1 second.
Don't worry.
Okay, so I believe you're sharing right now, James. So I'll just explain. So idioms are common phrases get thrown around all the time, usually as a metaphor for something. So to be sold down the river was to be betrayed or undermined in some way. I'm glad to see that no one thought it was appropriate. This one's probably the most obvious on the list. And it's most problematic because of its origin. It comes from particularly the American slave trade. And it used to be about selling slaves down the Mississippi River from a particularly, it's hard to word this properly, but for lack of a better terminology, nice plantation to a worse plantation as a punishment, essentially. What's in all, everyone has, most people have said no. It's actually sort of questionable. It can, for me, it seems like it would be a situational thing, but it's from Oliver Cromwell, and he was very much about not succumbing to personal vanity, which is why he insisted that his portrait painter painted him warts and all, and as he was. Throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Everyone said no, or maybe no one said yes. This one's actually, it's about being careless. It's German. I personally, I couldn't find very much on it that was problematic, apart from maybe the first English translation was used by Thomas Carlyle in a paper titled Occasional Discourse on the Negro Question. So it has a potential problematic link to slavery, but Thomas Carlyle was an abolitionist. So again, it's up to you whether you use that one. I'd maybe err on the side of caution and not use it. And everyone said no to falling on deaf ears, and I assume everyone knows why. It's because it would be inclusive, particularly of deaf people. And I had this conversation with a friend who used this exact phrase and chastised himself because he has 3 deaf children. So it's really easy to slip up, even when you have that lived experience. But Alex, you actually raised a really, really good point about not understanding what's going on, not understanding what these were. Metaphors don't translate very well. They only work if you are used to hearing them. Your first language is the language that those phrases come from, and you have a really good ability to understand from context what they mean. If your first language isn't English, if you've never heard it before, or if you're neurodiverse, a lot of these might go over your head.
That makes sense.
I saw you laughing, Alex.
Yeah. So when you mentioned being neurodiverse earlier, I knew that this was going to be something I could bring up as an example. So yeah, neurodiverse people often have trouble interpreting metaphors. They don't work well for them. So whilst metaphors work really well for a lot of people to help explain sometimes complex issues, if you can't explain that complex issue without a metaphor, you might find that you've got some people who come to your training that will never understand it because you're always using metaphors to explain it. So I'm going to stop sharing the poll results. Maybe something that everyone can do in the spare time is think of other common phrases or sayings that they maybe don't understand. Like you've heard it and you don't actually understand what it means, or phrases that to you seem like it might be problematic. And particularly that first one where its origins are so egregious, like that's one that I particularly wouldn't use. And falling on deaf ears, yeah, definitely don't use, especially if you've got 3 deaf children. So we are going into towards the end of the session, and I'm just going to run through some practical tips. Oh, only one of them's popped up. Apparently my animation was broken on that slide. So I've got 2 sets of inclusion and practice tips there on the screen. The first is day-to-day. So these are things that I think everyone can do, regardless of what they're doing, whether L&D or just a general employee, a manager, or anything. So we did the first one, use correct pronouns and preferred name. So if you have met someone and they had one name and they said, actually, can you call me by this other name? Use the new name. So I have a colleague at the Eco Group called Dragon. I've known Dragon for about 3 years and I knew them before they were called Dragon. But I had to adapt calling them Dragon rather than their given name, which took practice. But as it's their dead name, I no longer use it. Where time permits, spend time getting to know the individual and understanding their needs, their personal issues. Don't have to get super deep, but just as long as you have an understanding of how to respect that person, how to engage with them, it'll help be really inclusive. Think about when you're planning events, be consciously inclusive. So in a physical setting, that's really obvious, making sure it's wheelchair accessible, making sure there's enough room for a wheelchair to get around the room, or people in crutches. But there's other things within you don't think about in rooms, and it's like things like clutter, how it directs like in the space towards the front of the room, how it helps people to be engaged with the session. These are all things that physically you need to think about. And then even virtually, you should probably think about it as well. are using slides? Is a lot of information on them? Is it the font size correct? Is it easy to understand? One thing that I'm really not good at is prepping for people with dyslexia, because I don't always think about it the first time around. So I'm really waiting for someone with dyslexia to come on a training session with me and shout at me for not being inclusive of them, because then that will let me develop. Hopefully I'll fix it before then. I've not been able to run it past anyone who's dyslexic yet, though, to check this suits them.
I can set that up for you, Alan. My co-founder of Send It to Alex is dyslexic and autistic, so we could collab on that if you like.
That'd be amazing. My email address is just allan@theequalgroup.com. So ensure your mentors or advisors are diverse. So not always going to the same people, particularly if they look like you. So if you are a cis white man, are you always going to other cis white men? Maybe think about looking at talking to one of your the women in your office, or looking for someone from an ethnic minority group to engage with, and seeing how they feel about your work and how you engage with people, and providing equitable development. Specifically for training, I'm assuming if any of you are like me, you've probably already read through this list, but I'll just go through it for those who haven't. So limiting break rooms to allow inclusion. So this is about making sure that everyone in the room has a voice, or has the option to have a voice. If you have too many folk in a room, there's always going to be people who dominate that room, and some people who won't actually get the opportunity to speak, even if they do want to speak, because they don't feel comfortable speaking up. Similarly, if you have too few people, it can stifle conversation, because maybe if they know each other quite well, they go off on a tangent and talk something else. If they don't know each other well, they maybe struggle to open up to each other. Where necessary and possible, utilize pre-session handouts to help understanding. I found this helps me a lot. If there's something that I can read before the session, it'll help me in the session process what's going on. And that, for the other neurodiverse people in here, that's a good tip. If you can access something before the session to help you understand what's going on, it'll help you. I can see Claire, I don't know if she's getting stressed at me or she's just relaxed. Reinforce the safe space message in every session. Utilize AI tools to challenge your writing. So I do have a few of them in the resources sections that we sent out. And check your pronunciation. So if you've got names that you're not sure of, just ask the question and make sure that person knows that if you get it wrong, they can correct you. So I think I'm actually ahead of time. I might have. But these slides are going to get sent out, so everyone will have access to them. And if anyone has any questions, I've given my email to Alex. Hopefully everyone else noted it down, but if you don't, it's dead easy, allan@theequalgroup.com. So if you have any questions, you feel free to send them to me. But these resources, you've got the first one, Gender Decoder. It's a free online tool. It was designed for job adverts and for students. But you just copy and paste any of your text into the Gender Decoder, and it will tell you if your writing is either masculine or feminine coded. Unfortunately, in the society we've set up, we have masculine and feminine coded words. And what psychology has found out is that, particularly with job adverts, if a job advert is particularly masculine encoded, it will limit the amount of women that apply. They also found that it has some impact on LGBTQ+, neurodiversity, and even ethnicity. It can reduce the amount of people who apply who fit these characteristics. Grammarly, Text Help, and Textio are all apps that you can download. You can get extensions for your browser, and they can challenge how you write. Grammarly is the only one that has a free option. Its free option is good. I think it could be better, but for a free option, you can't complain. But with the paid versions of each of these, there's so many tools within them. So if you work for a company that's prepared to pay for something to help them be more inclusive, I would recommend looking into one of these. There is another one that I found out about recently called Witty, which Textio and Grammarly are American companies. So their system's a bit, it's set up for American English. Witty is a British version, as is Text Help. So it's set up for British English. If you want to get better at pronunciation, my name is .raceequalitymatters.com. It's a self-reporting, so people have to put in their own name and say how it's supposed to be pronounced. So it was set up this year, so there is a lot of names already on it, but the more people use it, the better it's going to get. And I think even as particularly British names, or if you've got a name that comes from Gaelic, they can be really hard for non-British people to pronounce who haven't heard them before. The amount of people I've heard say Siobhan to Siobhan, because they've never seen Siobhan before. Howtopronounce.com is more about words, but it does have names on it as well, so it can be also really useful. Neurodiversityhub.org is a one-stop shop for any resources that you need to help you be more inclusive for neurodiversity, or even help you understand what support could be put in place for yourself if you're neurodiverse. And accessibility. So I went to the opposite university. I went to the University of Aberdeen, and here I am sharing something from Dundee University. But they have this really great guide for creating inclusive teaching materials. I think the way they've written it can be applied to any facilitation of any learning. I think, yes, that's the end of the resources section. As you saw there's some short films attached to the slides that you can go and watch in your own time if you want to. I have ran about 5 minutes ahead of schedule, so that leaves plenty of time for questions and answers if anyone has any questions they want to ask. I'm going to stop sharing my screen as well so we can see each other.
So thanks, Alan. That was great. It was really interesting. I learned absolutely loads and loads of stuff from that. So yeah, do you want to think about some questions for Alan? I think I do apologise because I logged myself out instead of introducing Alan. So I do apologise at the beginning. But obviously, I think what's really, really great is that you know, Alan talks about his you know, being a member of LGBTQ+ and the queer communities, and also having AHD as well. So that they are a really good example of sort of someone that sort of living and breathing inclusivity and also maybe being discriminated, or not discriminated, but maybe you know, understanding what it's like not to feel included in something. So that's why I wanted to give an opportunity so that you can ask Alan some questions. So you can either raise your hands, or if you'd like to put it in the chat box, then we can facilitate that. So have a think about anything you'd like to talk to Alan about in terms of inclusivity or his role at the Equal Group as well.
Hi, Alan. I'm wondering what you think is the best way to start a conversation with people, to let them know maybe the kind of help that you need. What would you say is a good way to let people help you?
For me, to let people help me, it's this. There is a bit about you. You need to be prepared to open up, and you need to be prepared to give people the benefit of the doubt that they actually do want to help you. I went 29 years of my life not knowing I was neurodiverse. I only got my official diagnosis this year. The it took me 18 months through the NHS. But I also went 27 years of my life rejecting basically all parts of my identity. Like I didn't come out as queer until I was 27. So that's built up a lot of issues for me, in that I closed down. I don't really share massive parts of myself with a lot of people. So being able to actually engage in good faith with people and give them the benefit that they do want to help you is a big part of that. But a lot of it's about how they make you feel in that space. When I was at Network Rail, I never felt safe or comfortable. So I never felt like I could raise my concerns with my manager. My manager was one of the lads, so he joined in with all the banter and the sexism and the racism and the homophobia. So I never felt like I had to open up and engage with him. Whereas where I am now, okay, we are an equality group, so you would hope they were good at it. It'd be really, really odd if they weren't good at it. But I feel like I'm respected. I feel like Matt, my boss, really wants to understand, and he wants to get to know me. So he's constantly asking me questions about how I feel, how I'm doing, what I need support with. But he's also doing a bit of legwork to see if there's things that he can offer me, and that's a big deal. Particularly, I don't know, Alex, if you've found this, but people say, what can we do to help? And your mind goes blank.
I was just sitting here thinking I need to put my hand down because I forgot what I was going to say. Yes, I do.
So, but if people come to you and they say, we want to help you, we found these resources or these tools, or this is a list of support that we put in place before, or these are the list of things that we put in place before, that can give me a good indication of what's available. And I can take that, and obviously if it's a tool, I have to use it as is. But if it's a support structure that's been put in place before, I can look at the other support structures and I can see if I can adapt them to fit my particular needs. I hope that's answered the question. I feel like I went off on a bit of a tangent.
Thank you, Alan.
Alex, have you remembered what you were?
No, but I was just going to add to what you said there about it's difficult, isn't it, when people do want to be supportive and they are encouraging. So like when you send a handout, it's all about the branding and the language, you saying we are open to conversations about if you need adjustments, please, and sort of opening up those liners for you to then know that you can approach people rather than wait for them to approach you. Because like you said, when someone does approach you, it just shuts everything down. So if you know that if you would like to talk to me about, have a picture of that person, right? I already know what that person's like, so I won't look at them and start analysing them or trying to recognise things and get distracted whilst I'm remembering that I've actually come over to ask you something. And it's just creating not just the environment, but just getting familiar with the person and the topic. So I already know that I can talk to this person, that's what this person looks like, and this is what I'm going to talk to them about.
Yeah, definitely. Having that, those systems and frameworks in place to sort of tell people that there are routes that they can utilize to get support for themselves, a huge thing. It allows people to do it on their own time, because you're not always going to be fully aware of what you need when you start a job, because you don't really know exactly how the work's going to affect you and how it's going to go. So yeah, having that space to access it at a later date when you need it, and people's circumstances change as well. I didn't know I was neurodiverse until until about 18 months ago, and someone went, actually, you sound that you might have ADHD. I went to my doctor sort of did a quick test, went, there's some symptoms there, we're going to send you to a psychiatrist. that led me down a rabbit hole of like, what can I do to support myself, or what can I do to ask employers for? A lot of employers maybe don't always have the systems in place to allow people to check up on that at a later date. And we're talking about employment here, but even in L&D facility space, you might have someone come in and the first 10 minutes, hour, 2 hours, half a day, however long it might take them to realize, actually, I'm struggling here. But if you set up the system that people can stop you and ask you for support or resources or anything whenever they realize they need it, then that's a really good system to have in place. I'm just having a look through the comments. I'm noticing blue sky thinking, yeah, it does always have to be explained. I never knew what it meant until someone actually fully explained it to me. And I went years with people just saying it constantly and just ignoring it because I don't know what that means. Just move past it as if you totally understood it. Charlotte, so I think the words feeling safe and comfortable are so powerful and important. In L&D, we also have to be aware of ourselves from the delivery sessions to ensure people can feel those things. Yeah, definitely. And you have to be aware of how you're engaging with the room, which is why I asked if people are comfortable, keep your camera on, because it lets me know if you're actually engaging with the session. I noticed Mark just looked up because he was, I think he felt called out there. I wasn't. I know people have other things that are going on. You are listening because you're keeping your camera on. I do it as well.
Sorry, I was writing notes.
that's fine. I do it because with ADHD, I need distraction. So I quite often have multiple things on. So I'm often looking over here at a different screen. I've actually moved you. You were all on that screen. You're on this screen now. But it helps me focus on the conversation if I can keep myself busy outside of it. Is there any other questions before I just waffle on for the next 10 minutes?
So Alan, if I was running a course and we were doing introductions and somebody introduced himself and said, "Oh, by the way, I think you should know I've got ADHD." What if you sort of had to give me 2 bits of advice of how I could sort of on the spot potentially adapt something I'd already developed? What would that be?
Oh, that's a really good question.
That's you on the spot now.
Yeah,
Sorry.
it is. My mind's not blank. I think for the most part, you can't really do much in that moment. But you can say to them, "Thanks for letting me know. If there's anything that you can think of right now that would help you in the session, let me know. But if you think about it midway through the session, just depending on how the session is, if it's a Zoom session, stick your hand up, let me know, send me a private message. Zoom's got the option to send direct messages to individuals. If it's in a physical session, maybe you need to stick their hand up and ask if they have a word outside, just to let you know what they need. Because every ADHD person's different, how we process things. So one of the things I've learned is it's attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is possibly the worst name for it, because it doesn't actually say what's going on. What's going on is a dopamine regulation issue, which makes us hyperactive and makes us attention deficit because we're searching for dopamine. So how we get dopamine differs between everyone. So how we need support will differ as well. For me, death by PowerPoint is a big issue. So if I need interaction, so I need those breakout rooms where I have discussions, where I get to speak to people, where I get to talk and engage, or hear someone else's voice. If I'm hearing the same person's voice for 4 hours and no one else is speaking, I've not paid attention for the last 3.5 hours. I've been in my head playing games, because apparently I can do that. I can play full games in my head. So yeah, making sure that you change how you present things, seeing if you can engage with people in the room, asking them questions and getting them to engage with you more. Breaks, if it's a long session, having those breaks for coffee. Caffeine is a huge way to get dopamine. So for me, I drink lots and lots of coffee throughout the day, which probably affects my sleeping pattern really badly. It's already really bad, but it keeps me focused on my work. But yeah, that's maybe two things, like thinking about how often your breaks are. I know you can't have too many breaks, you still have stuff to get through, but if you've got a 4-hour session and only one break, chances are people are zoning out. There's that whole thing that people can pay attention for about 45 minutes and then you need to get up and move around and step away. That's a catch-all. I don't think it's true for everyone. Some people, they'll pay attention for, yeah, but it's something worth thinking about. If pay attention to the room, not just that ADHD person, but if people in the room start to flag, chances are the ADHD person's flagging as well, and they're just doing something to make it look like they're paying attention.
Can I just add to that as well? Just they're all exactly, I feel you on all of those. Another thing is, if you're doing training, is scenario based, because you're then making them, when you, with ADHD, your mind wanders when you zone out. But if you do scenarios, they get pulled into that scenario and they think about themselves in that situation. So it helps embed learning and it brings you back into focus on what you're learning about. Yeah, so anything that lends itself to scenario-based learning is use the scenarios. Again, it's in moderation, because if you use the scenarios too often, it's the scenario fatigue is the other issue. It's that everything in moderation, everything in balance, otherwise you overuse it. And some other people might not like the scenario based. We spoke about people having mental health issues. Scenario based learning needs them to get engaged, and they might not feel comfortable, so you still have to balance it.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Alan. That brings us very nicely to the end of a fantastic session. So thank you so much for sharing your time with us, and a fantastic and interesting, great session, and also sharing things about yourself as well, which has been really useful. And also thanks for everyone else that's contributed as well, especially Alex, that's shared a lot of stuff as well. That's been very, very useful as well. So Alan, can I just ask you if you could just share the share bit? So we've got a Survey Monkey, as ever. It's in the chat box. If you can give us some feedback, that's absolutely fantastic. That obviously helps us moulding what we're going to do. And if you could just flick forward one more time, please, Alan. The next session, which the lovely James Tupper is organising, is on the 7th of June, and it is a face-to-face session. It's sort of a world cafe style event in central Milton Keynes, and it's about building the value and credibility of L&D. It's going to be absolutely brilliant. I don't know, James, you want to say something very quickly about it? Quick sell.
Well, I just go back to the fantastic statement Jose gave earlier in this session about how wonderful World Cafe is. And so it's pretty special, and the guest facilitators themselves are pretty special people. So I highly recommend it. And I might just try and find the link and put it in chat. Okay. So while you're doing that, Alan, could you just pop one more slide up for me? Thank you very much. So apologies if I missed this, because I had obviously logged myself out. But obviously the Learning Matters group, we're volunteers, and we really do need some more people to come and join the group. So it's a great opportunity to give something back to the community in the CIPD, make loads of friends, lots and lots of contacts. We meet lots of interesting people like Alan. Obviously, it helps us deepens the L&D knowledge, and obviously it's great for your CV as well. So if you do have a little bit of time, it doesn't take masses of time.
It's just a couple of hours a month or so. And if you want to join a group and contribute, if you want to email the Bedford at CIPDbranch.co.uk, and that's James that's looking after that, then we'd love to have you on the committee. Brilliant. So that we are absolutely spot on time. So again, that big thank you to Allan, and also thank you for James, who's helped co-facilitate this session. And we look forward to seeing you at the event on the 7th of June, the 100 Up.
Thank you. Just quickly before we leave, there's a perfect example of correcting yourself in the chat from Mark. My name, it's a very common name, but people spell it wrong all the time. So I've got this Scottish spelling of Allan, with A-L-L-A-N, and Mark's spelled it with the E, which is perfectly fine. I'm not pressed my name personally, but that great session. Thank you, Allan. Realised he spelled it wrong, immediately fixed it. In conversation, even the sorry is not needed. But it's the same with pronouns. If you use the wrong pronouns and catch yourself, just correct the pronouns and move on. So thanks everyone for being engaged with this session. Hopefully you all get the slides and the handout if you didn't get it already. And if anyone is needing it or wants any other conversations, hopefully you've all got my email now.
Brilliant. Lovely. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Alan.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.